Hello, everyone. I've been asked to do a tech talk for the Coast Guard Auxiliary. My name is David Hyde. I'm currently the flotilla commander. The new nomenclature is Eastern Division, Southern Region in Division 24, Flotilla '08. So the question for today is, what is ham radio? Think what you already know about amateur or ham radio. Unfortunately, I'm not with you in person today, or we could ask you all what knowledge you already have regarding ham radio. My guess is that you know more than you think. So, why do we call it ham radio? That's a really good question. Nobody really knows why. Home amateur conflated to ham. This is one of my theories. Ham-fisted operators, like Morse code operators, were said to have a distinct and recognizable fist or style when tapping out messages. Uh, the words high frequency amplitude modulated radio might have been shortened to HAM, and then that was picked up as a preferred acronym. You could probably think up your own ham origin story, although some hams tend to be over the top, as the saying goes, about monopolizing the airways, as in ham actors. So that's another possibility. FCC licensing. The listen to ham radio only requires a shortwave receiver or connection to the internet. I will try to demo this later at a place called websdr.org. SDR stands for Software Defined Radio. So to broadcast using ham radio, a license from the FCC is required. The licenses are not very expensive and they last for 10 years before needing to be renewed. And if you renew before expiration date, there's no test. If you let your license expire, there might be a test to get it reinstated. So basically, today, hams come in 3 levels. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we look at the band chart. You can find more information on the internet at the FCC website. So the lowest category is technician. They can use all of the VHF amateur frequencies and some of the high frequencies. And we'll talk about what those frequencies are in a few minutes. General, that's like a mid-range qualification. That's technician privileges plus additional high frequencies, HF frequencies. And then extra, which is the highest qualification, same as above, plus all amateur frequencies. And what does that mean, all amateur frequencies? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. So how do you get licensed? You guessed it, you have to take a test. But you get a study guide, all the correct answers, and all the distractors. Out of a pool of 1,000 questions, you'll be asked about 35 for the technician license and only 50 for amateur extra. Each test is randomly selected from the 1,000 question pool, but you can study all the right answers first. The point of the test is to study and learn about the hobby first. Doesn't having your own radio station sound pretty cool? Oh, wait, there are some rules to learn and operate by. For instance, you cannot broadcast music. You cannot encrypt transmissions, no secret code. You must not use offensive language or profanity. And you must identify your station using their call sign at least once every 10 minutes. And there are others. Does it still sound cool? You betcha. So what are common uses for ham radio? Emergency communications during natural and man-made disasters, both local and hundreds of miles away, without any additional equipment. Storm tracking and current weather information, fire encroachment warnings, smoke, air quality warnings, dangerous chemical spills, information about relief supplies needed and where to get them. And you can probably think of a number of other things that ham radio might be good for once we finish here today. You could use it as a source for the news and weather, political updates in parts of the world where such information is restricted on local radio, TV, and other news sources. Or you can't trust it. What about fun things to do as a ham? My wife thinks the disembodied electronic voices are really my imaginary friends, but you can get to know people on the other end of the ether there. Uh, so it can be fun. You can learn a new language by listening to native speakers. You make new friends around the world if you have multiple contacts with them. You can find out the truth from real people about what's really going on around the world. You could learn about electronics and engineering or other subjects. You might be able to invent new and interesting communication protocols and gadgets. If you get interested in the hardware aspect, you can assist people who suddenly find themselves without cell service or landlines for one reason or another. Is that possible to lose your cell service or your landline? Absolutely. Yes, ham radio is over 100 years old. 100 years old. Is it still relevant? Analog digital information may be sent over ham radio using computers to encode and decode the messages. So you're pairing a ham radio with a computer. Telemetry data from sensors and satellites. Yes, some hams and amateur organizations have their own satellites. Road warriors or commuters use ham radio every day to get local information and keep track of family members. It's so much more refined than citizen band. So here's a chart that shows some of the wavelengths that we're able to operate with. So 160 meters is the wavelength. You don't need to know the physics aspect of this, but if you do, all the better. So that 160 meters translates to 1.8 megahertz up to 30 megahertz. And what's a megahertz? MHz megahertz. That's 1,000 hertz. What's a hertz? A hertz is a cycle per second. So megahertz would be 1 million cycles per second. 80 meters, 3.5 to 4 megahertz, and on down the chart. Then we get to 6 meters and 2 meters. 2 meters or 144 megahertz to 148 is considered VHF. Commercial and marine bands can go higher than 148, but that's the limit on the amateur bands. So high frequency are the bands 160, 80, 40, 20, and 10. And then VHF starts at 6, and then 2 meters, and VHF is only good for FM, which is frequency modulation, line of sight comms. This is just a real cursory look at the different frequency bands. We'll get into a little bit more in a minute. So, is anything going on at ham radio at any one point in the day or the world or time of day? Let's take a look. Bear with it a second. It'll take a second to bring up the link. Okay, here's a picture that I took a couple of days ago. That's just basically all of the communications that are currently going on that have been captured in this application. All these lines represent separate conversations that are occurring between two or more stations. So this chart was selected for all bands. So all of the frequency ranges you saw before, they would be included here for LF and HF, high frequency and low frequency bands. So this is quite scary when you look at this to see that all this stuff is out there on the airways at the same time, and hopefully isn't interfering with each other. So you can see the US on the left, Europe on the right. Sometimes you can just select a band that's common or popular in Europe, and you can see all the activity there. And if you expand this map a little bit more, you'll see that there are little labels on the stations. If you open up the label, it will tell you the station's call sign, probably its geographical location, GPS location, and some information maybe about what mode it's operating at. So there's a ton of information here. This is open to the public. You can go to dxmaps.com and you can find that. Okay, there are some things that the military uses and also that hams use called WinLink or shares. Now, basically, they're computer applications that can control radio stations through the computer for automatic messages like email, like an AM email network, AM being AM radio, for instance. WinLink stands for Window Link or WinLink Global Radio Email. Shares is primarily used by the military for shared resources, high frequency radio program. Shares supports national security and emergency preparedness missions, communicate when cell and landline comms are non-operational. So let's take a look at the band plan as published by the American Radio Relay League. Okay, U.S. amateur radio bands. Now, if you look to the right, there's a column with little boxes in different colors. That's your legend. So red is radio teletype and data. Green is phone and image, phone being a voice or single sideband. And the squiggly line, the sine wave there, that's continuous wave only. That's like Morse code or some other digital type of communication, mostly Morse code, international Morse. And then the yellow is single sideband phone. So you can use that in just that one area. But if you're outside of that, you might be in the green area and you can use single sideband phone and image. Yes, you could send images over ham radio. There's actually a slow scan TV network around the world where hams trade pictures and other images. And you can download satellite imagery as well. So blue, light blue there. I don't see it on the chart, but the legend says that's upper sideband phone, CW, radio teletype, and data. And then orange, which is fixed digital message forwarding systems only. So that's another form of email over the radio. And it shouldn't shock you that you could do email over the radio. Satellite links are basically radio stations that are transmitting internet information. So if we look down here on the left, that's 2,200 meters. That's 135 kilohertz. That's a relatively new band that's open up for amateurs. And then you see 630, and then we get into the 160 meters. So that means if you look at the little EAG there, if you look at the legend, E is amateur extra, A is advanced, G is general, T is technician, and N is novice. Before, we only talked about the fact that there was technician, general, and amateur extra. So that's what's offered these days as licensing if you take a test. In the past, you could get qualified as an advanced and or a novice. So you'll see those are interleaved in between amateur extra at the top, and novice was the least qualified, and then there's technician. So that should be self-explanatory. If you have questions about that, you can always send them in. So what does that mean? Okay, if we want to talk on, say, the 20 meters band, I don't know if you can see my let's see if you can see my drawing here. Okay, 20 meters is right here. Okay. So this means that our frequencies that we're going to use on the radio are somewhere between 14 megahertz, if you look at the numbers at the top left, and then 14.350 megahertz, if you look at what's on the top right here. So this is the maximum limit of the band. And this is the minimum limit of the band here. Now, below a certain frequency, which is right here, we'll put a box around that. The center frequency here in the band, if you will. From that on up the band, from 14,150 to 14,350, you can do voice communications. Below that, in the red, you can only do radio teletype. So for amateur extra, you have all those frequencies available. For general, you notice that starts at 14,025. So the lower half of that band is extra only. And then you have various little windows for advanced and general. that start at different points. So you can't, if you only have a general qualification, for instance, transmit at one of the frequencies that's reserved for amateur extra. So getting your extra license, which really isn't that much harder than getting the general license, gives you more privileges on different bands. All right, so you can go to the Amateur Radio Relay League organization, and you can get a picture of this chart that you can look at yourself, or you could just search for something called HAM, H-A-M, bands, B-A-N-D-S, and it should pull this up for you. Okay. Let's see if we can go to, let's see if we can get out of here. All right. All right. So we've got some clutter on the screen here, but we can live with that. All right, as you saw when we looked at the snapshot on the DX website, ham radio is very much alive and well and in use everywhere. So you just have to decide what type of ham radio you might want to listen to. So I highly recommend that you explore the internet regarding ham radio. And I'll show you in a second how you can find a listening site. One of my favorites is websdr.org. There are others around the world on the internet. Well, let's check that out for a second here and see what that sounds like.
Here we are on WebSDR. You can get to many different countries on WebSDR. You can listen to different languages, so it can be quite interesting. So let's see. Let's go pick a country here. Let's try, I want to know, let's try South America, for instance. Let's see, South America, right here. Okay. Let's just pick one of the early ones here. How about Argentina? So if we go and we pick Argentina and San Juan in Argentina, call sign is LU6PSG. We get to a screen that looks like this. So what you're seeing is they're calling a cascada or a cascade, or we call it like a waterfall. On an actual receiver, this would be called like a pan adapter waterfall. And if you look in the middle of the screen, you can see this little symbol here. This means that we're listening to where the position is here. So if you look at the cascade or waterfall, you see these kind of pink or purple lines. These are conversations that are going on. So if we try to move this over, let's see, we'll try to move this a little bit to the left here. So maybe we can get that, and we'll start the audio. Audio doesn't come on automatically, so we'll start that. So we're a little off frequency. So there are a couple of ways to adjust the frequency. You can do it with by moving the cursor here. You can see that corrects sounds a little bit better. There's also a way to move it if we go over to a different part of the screen. And we can maybe see a different part of the screen here. We'll pull the screen down some. And we have a way to correct it down at the lower left. So if you look down here, you can correct it a few hertz at a time. That's not helping. Let's try the other side.
no voy a tener papel de la jubilación, así que estamos persiguiendo lo que se ahorró durante el transcurso de
Now that
varios
sounds
años.
more normal. That sounds
Así que
like a real conversation.
no hay mucho tormento, como dicen los viejitos ahí de la otra banda,
So
campeón.
here's just one example of using web SDR. I suggest that you go to this website and you try a number of different things here on this website and just play around with it a little bit and see what you can hear. There's a good help on the website. You can find some good information here. And it's fun, among other things. So this should help you out. All right, I think we're done with this. Let's go on to another slide.
Okay, so I'm back. So hopefully you didn't miss too much dialogue before, if any. So I'm going to show you a quick video of my radio, which is an IC 7300. So I'm going to show you what a QSO is. QSO down the slide here is a ham speak for a two-way conversation, basically. So I've made contact with another ham. He's acknowledged that I've made contact, and we exchanged some information about signal strength, things like that. This is like what you would do if you were participating in a radio contest. So let's see if we can do that video very quickly here. So what you're going to see is a picture of the pan adapter on my radio. Looks very much like the waterfall or cascade on the previous screen that we saw for if we want to communicate with digital modes. So you'll hear on some radio stations, you'll hear weird noises, things like that, and there won't be any voices. Well, that's an example of analog to digital and digital to analog conversion. So there's a tool called FL Digi, which will go in. You can get this off of sourceforge.net. Let's take a look at it. So this is a neat little thing. So if I'm monitoring audio, right now, what you're seeing is my voice coming out at the screen at the bottom on the waterfall display. It'll give you some information over here about what frequency you're listening to. It thinks it's listening to the radio. There's a USB cable that would normally be connected to the radio. And right now, the mode we're operating at is continuous wave, or some of you might call it Morse code. So I might want to send a message here. So I'm going to say CQ, CQ, and I'm going to say my call sign, and then CQ again, which means seek, like the word SEEK, YOU, but it's a letter Q. So if we transmit that, it's going to sound like Morse code. Whoops, we only got the CQ. Let's try that again. Sometimes this happens. We just usually excuse it by saying we have technical difficulties. Okay, so I just put a call out to say, I'm asking some other station to come back to me. So hopefully they will do that. They will come back and I will be able to hear them. So you saw it on the screen here, but that's just Morse code. That's pretty recognizable. What if I use some other mode? Like some of our radio nets use a different digital mode. I'll put the same message in and it will sound entirely different. So that's CQ, my call sign, N380E, or November 3 Alpha Delta Echo, if you know phonetic alphabet. Probably something you've learned in Scouts. Okay, so that was CQ and my call sign in a different digital mode. So this particular application has very many digital modes here. We'll look at this. So there's several modes here that you can use, and each mode may have sub modes with slightly different characteristics. So this is a pretty complicated piece of software, but very easy to use. Once you set it up, you can use it for a lot. Now here's a radio teletype. So there's radio teletype 45, 50, 750, 75W. You can look up what those particular references mean. There's a lot of radio teletype traffic that you can pick up over the airwaves. Okay, let's see, we'll get out of here. So we've looked at a QSO, what FLDigi is, and whatever. But the burning question you all should have now is, how does the auxiliary use ham radio? I'm sure you all want to know that. The technology is basically the same used by amateur radio, a single sideband radio, otherwise known as a shortwave transceiver. Transceiver is a conflated word. It combines the words transmitter and receiver. So you can have one device, push to talk, press the button and you're transmitting, let off the button and you're receiving. So the Department of Homeland Security has a chart of frequencies that can be used for DHS communication purposes. Of course, it's classified, and these frequencies cannot be legally used by amateur radio operators for amateur use and are reserved for U.S. government only. The Coast Guard Auxiliary has established radio nets around the country by district that use these frequencies. So what's a net? A net or net traffic is a way to control the information that's passed from station to station by having net control. The net control controls that traffic by naming each station and asking for input. This way, no station is in doubt as to when to contribute their information. So once you've checked into the net, you're added to a list, and then the net control officer or net control will call you by your station name and ask for input, traffic, or other messages that you may have to pass on in the net. And that traffic can consist of informal or formal information directed to another station or all stations on the net, or someone who isn't on the net that will get a relay from one of the stations that picks it up. When all traffic has been passed and all announcements have been made, the net is closed, which means everybody shuts off their radio or goes to some other station. In other words, that frequency is now clear. So a net works like an on-air meeting with one member, the NECOS, acting as the chairperson. I'm sure you've been in meetings or places, like entertainment, and everybody's talking at once, and it's almost impossible to identify each and every conversation and hear what's actually being said by a single person. That's why we have net control. We can avoid confusion and maintain some kind of order. Net participation and experience. I personally participated in 2 different auxiliary HF contingency nets on a regular basis. For one net, I'm just a participating station from District 5. And for the other net, I'm the net control station for District 5. So having a net control ensures efficient information transfer without misunderstanding. In order to participate in a Coast Guard auxiliary high-frequency contingency net, my equipment must be part of an operational facility, just like any other OPFAC, such as a boat. In addition to this, to establishing nets, there's something called AuxMon. That's where the auxiliary tasks certain shortwave stations, facilities, to listen for boaters making distress calls on marine single sideband radios. There's special computer software used with those radios that decode these, and you get distress calls for marine single sideband procedures that provide the vessel's GPS, global positioning system coordinates, and MMSI. MMSI is something called Marine Mobile Surface Identity, which is an index to a database accessible to the Coast Guard that may contain additional information about the vessel in distress. Very similar to the DSC calling that you find on your VHF marine radios. Same concept. AuxScout is an auxiliary monitoring OPFEC station. The AuxScout's responsibility involves listening on single sideband radios on specific distress frequencies during specified times of day as requested by the control authority. And like I say, this is a little different from the channel 16 distress calls, which are local, because channel 16 and DSCs are marine VHF frequency modulated line of sight communications, whereas high frequency single sideband signals can be heard for hundreds of miles. Marine VHF is only about 36 miles. So in addition to the HF radio, you do need special computer software to interpret that information. All marine vessels that operate U.S. waters must be equipped with marine VHF radios. Ocean-going vessels should also be equipped with marine single sideband radios. And ships can use marine single sideband radios for long-distance communications when out of marine VHF range, which is about 36 miles. Other things to explore. For more information on amateur radio modes like amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, single sideband, and digital, and the frequency ranges, MLF, HF, high frequency. So MLF is a low frequency kind of radio frequency band, and VHF is very high frequency. UHF is ultra high frequency. That's up in the 400 megahertz range. The internet's an excellent source. You can find a wealth of information about marine distress calls and many examples thereof. If you're just curious about what amateur or ham radio sounds like, I would suggest trying WebSD.org on your own, as we did in this demo. There you can listen worldwide to ham operators from participating stations around the world over the internet, in the comfort of your own home, office, or wherever you happen to be. And in some cases, you can get mobile apps you can listen to on the phone. Thank you all for being here today, watching this presentation. I hope everyone learned something they didn't already know about ham radio and how that technology is used to support the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. Please provide feedback. All is welcome, negative or positive, to your host. Any outstanding questions may be directed to me through your host if you cannot find satisfactory answers on the internet. Thank you.